Hello everybody, Stingray here. My last video turned out to be a lot more controversial than I expected it to be. And so in this video, I just want to clear the air regarding my thoughts on turn rewinding and permadeath in Fire Emblem as a whole, and I want to respond to some of the most common objections I saw in the comment section on the last video. So let's get into it. By far the most common criticism voiced was, well, if you don't like turn rewinding, just don't use it. It's optional. So first of all, it has to be pointed out that in Three Houses, and I haven't played Engage, so I'm just talking about Three Houses. In Three Houses, Divine Pulse is not optional on Maddening difficulty. Is it possible to beat Maddening without using Divine Pulse? Yes, but it's possible to beat Maddening difficulty without Divine Pulse in the same way that it's possible to beat Resident Evil 4 while only using the knife. For all but the greatest players, Divine Pulse is required to beat the game on Maddening. Also, the argument of, well, just don't use it, implies that turn rewinding has no effect upon gameplay unless turn rewinding is actually used. But this is not true. Turn rewinding is not a mechanic that exists in some vacuum, in isolation from every other mechanic in the game. Intelligent Systems designed Three Houses around the idea that the player would use turn rewinding often and pretty much every time they made a major mistake. The sheer number of pulses by the end of the game is evidence enough of this, but it's even evident in the level design. Like some of the paralogs, certain maps are really nasty, and they essentially require or strongly encourage the player to use turn rewinding. A good example of this might be the last map of the Silver Snow storyline. I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't played it, but that one is really difficult, and pretty much you're gonna have to use some rewinds. But let's put everything I just said to the side. Let's imagine that you could beat Maddening without using turn rewinding. Let's imagine that the game was not built with turn rewinding in mind. Even in that case, the just don't use it argument is still bad. To see why, consider a choice in game design that I think we can all agree would be bad. Let's say somebody is designing a survival horror game, and they give the player so much ammo that every combat encounter is just trivialized. Resource management is just thrown out the window because of just the sheer amount of ammunition that the game provides to the player. I hope we can all agree that that would be bad game design. It's bad game design to trivialize combat encounters for the player, at least in a game where combat is one of your primary gameplay mechanics. But notice that ammo use is optional in this game. You don't have to use every single round of ammunition that the game gives you. You can willfully restrict yourself to using only, say, 10 bullets per encounter or 5 bullets per encounter. Can we not criticize the developer's decision to give the player the amount of ammo they did simply because ammo use is optional? Surely not, right? We can criticize this decision even though ammo use is optional. Just because something is optional doesn't mean we can't criticize it. Okay, so here's the thing. This hypothetical survival horror game's decision to give the player so much ammo is analogous to Three Houses. Here's how I think it's analogous. Ammo is a resource, so is Divine Pulse. In both this survival horror game and Three Houses, the developer gives you too much of a resource. That is, they give you so much of a resource that combat encounters are just trivialized. And by trivialized, I mean that you have so much of this resource that there's no real chance that you would ever fail or lose. Now, why is that a bad thing? Well, combat is enjoyable in video games when there's an actual chance of failure. If you can just one-shot everything in the game's probably not going to be that fun. On the other hand, if everything can just one-shot you, you're probably not going to have very much fun either. In order for combat in video games to be engaging, it needs to be possible for the player to fail, but not overwhelmingly likely. At least in games that feature combat as one of their primary mechanics like Fire Emblem. The core principle I'm working with here is this. It needs to be possible for the player to lose, but not overwhelmingly likely. If you give the player too much of a powerful resource, it becomes almost impossible for them to lose, and then combat doesn't feel challenging and it's just not fun anymore. This is a pretty uncontroversial principle of game design, and if you accept it, I just don't see how you can defend the sheer amount of pulses that Three Houses gives the player. By around the second half of the game, you have so many pulses that it's virtually impossible for you to fail. Another common objection I saw was that turn rewinding just has all these great benefits. It respects your time by sparing you from resetting over and over again. It welcomes new players. It allows you to try out more risky and experimental strategies that you wouldn't otherwise try out if all your units can just die. And it saves you from those pesky misclicks, so by asking for turn rewinding to be removed from the series, I'm really just asking for the game to cater to me, and not other players who receive the benefits of turn rewinding. So the vibe I got from some of these comments was that I'm just an elitist who wants everybody to be forced to do Iron Man runs all the time and they just shouldn't have a choice in the matter. So this objection really frustrates me because it just could not be further from the truth. I do not want people to be forced to play Iron Man runs. For those of you who were in the comment section on the last video, this may surprise you, but the first Fire Emblem game and the first strategy game I ever beat was Three Houses. The only prior experience I had with Fire Emblem before Three Houses was a brief stint in high school where one of my friends tried to get me to play Genealogy, and I tried it, and I got my ass handed to me, all my units were dying, it sucked, and I didn't attempt another strategy game for years because I just thought I was trash at them. And on my first playthrough of Three Houses, I used Divine Pulse, and I played on normal mode because hard difficulty was too difficult for me. I totally understand how overwhelming these games can be as a new player. With all that being said, I still think that turn rewinding should either be removed or that it should be seriously de-emphasized. And here's why I think that. All of the advantages that are brought by turn rewinding are also brought by casual mode, but casual mode has none of the disadvantages of turn rewinding. On casual mode, misclicks are not a big deal because your units can't permanently die. Casual mode respects the player's time because you don't have to reset each time a unit dies. You're free to try out riskier and more experimental strategies because there's not as many long-term consequences for mistakes. And it gives new players a low-stress environment in which to learn the game's mechanics where they don't have to fear soft-locking themselves. I may have missed a benefit or two there, but I think you get the point. All of the benefits that you can list for turn rewinding are also provided by casual mode. Casual mode is better because it has none of the disadvantages of turn rewinding. On casual mode, your mistakes still have consequences, they're just not as harsh as they are on classic mode. If a unit dies, you'll get them back in the next chapter, but you'll have to complete the rest of the map without them. That means that your party is weakened and they miss out on some valuable XP. If a unit repeatedly dies chapter after chapter, they're going to get less XP overall and be weaker in the long run. Casual mode makes the game more forgiving without totally trivializing combat encounters. The cost of mistakes is far less steep, but you do still have to live with them. Divine Pulse, on the other hand, totally trivializes combat by allowing the player to literally erase mistakes. There's no tactical thought put into when it's used either, at least by the second half of the game, because you just have so many pulses. Now, I totally understand that there are ways to minimize the downsides of turn rewinding. One way is just to give the player less charges of Divine Pulse. Another fix would be to give the player a finite amount of pulses at the beginning of the game and not ever refill them. This would make the player think carefully about when they use rewinds, and it would also keep the tension high because the player knows that they may run out. And honestly, I think these fixes are pretty good. I think they would greatly improve the gameplay experience. My only misgiving with them is that I just see them as redundant because casual mode does all of this perfectly already. Looking back with the benefit of hindsight, I probably shouldn't have titled my video, "Turn Rewinding is Ruining Fire Emblem." While I did make it clear by the end of that video that I don't think turn rewinding is literally ruining the franchise, it is a clickbait and outrageous title, and I can see how people took it the wrong way. As long as future Fire Emblem games make Iron Man runs viable and allow the player to play without an extreme amount of uses of Divine Pulse, I'll be happy. Alright, that's all I had to say about this. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe for the algorithm, and have a good day.